Hi, everyone. Welcome and good evening, and thank you for joining this webinar on federal pension plans. So that you are aware, this webinar is being recorded. The information that will be covered in this webinar is applicable to federal government employees. My name is Beth Bennett, and I am a regional representative working in the Toronto Regional Office. I would like to begin by first acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we reside on today. The intention of land acknowledgements is one of reconciliation with the Indigenous peoples who have called this land home before the arrival of settlers like myself. We acknowledge that Ontario is the ancestral and unceded territory to many Indigenous peoples that continue to call this land home. I acknowledge my presence on this land as a visitor, and I am thankful for the many valuable contributions of Indigenous peoples who have cared for this land for thousands of years. So before we get into this wonderful webinar on pensions, I'm just going to do some housekeeping for everyone on the webinar. So many of you included pension-related questions when you registered for the webinar, and we have sent emails responding to most of those questions. For those of you who haven't received a written answer, please be patient. We are continuing to work through the remaining questions. Due to the large number of participants that we have on the webinar today, we will not be taking any verbal questions or monitoring for any raised hands. So if you are joining the webinar via the GoToWebinar app or online platform, you may ask your questions during the webinar using the questions box. Please keep in mind that we have limited time this evening, so if we can't get to your question during the presentation, we will respond in writing via email after the webinar. But again, give us a little bit of time to do that. If you're joining us by phone, you may email your questions by responding to your confirmation webinar email. If you have any technical issues while using the app or online platform, you can write those issues in the questions box as well, and we will absolutely do our best to try to assist with rectifying those issues. A reminder that the webinar is being recorded and will be available to members. So if those technical difficulties are severe in nature, you'll have the opportunity to look at the recording of the webinar at a later date. At the completion of the webinar, there will be a short survey. We would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to fill that out. If you need to leave the webinar early before it ends, or you simply don't have the time to complete the survey right after the webinar, we will also send it to you via email. So look out for that, and you can complete that in the coming up days. So I'm conscious of time, and I know there's a lot of information to go over with regards to the pension webinar. So I'm going to continue with the introductions of the folks who are on this, the back end of the webinar with me. So in addition to myself, we have Nicole Wall, who is a regional representative in the Toronto Regional Office. We have Michelle Herbert, who is a secretary in the Toronto Regional Office. And we also have James Infantino, who's our presenter. James works out of PSAC headquarters in Ottawa as the Pension and Disability Insurance Officer. With that being said, I'll pass it over to James. James, the virtual floor is yours.
Okay. Can everybody see that? Can everybody see that?
Sorry, yes, I think we can, James.
Okay.
I think we're good. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. As Sister Beth said, I'm James Infantino. I'm a National Pensions and Disability Insurance Officer for the Public Service Alliance of Canada. I'm delivering this presentation today from my basement office in Ottawa, Ontario, which is an unceded territory of the Algonquin and Nisga'a. Today, what we're going to do together is we're going to go through this presentation, and you see the front page of it, the header page. And what this actually is, it isn't a PSAC presentation. It's actually a presentation that's been put together by Public Service and Public Works Canada, Government Service and Public Works Canada. Usually prior to COVID-19, the arrival of COVID-19, I would give this presentation about 25 times a year. And the format was always the same. It'd be at 8:30 in the morning. It would last 3.5 hours with a 20-minute break. There would be about 25 to 30 people in the room, and I would go through each section and ask questions during this period of time. Now, obviously, we're living in different times, so this is going to be a different format. We have about an hour, I guess, for the presentation, and then the remainder for questions. So I'll be going through the presentation. I'm going to be concentrating on the areas that people rose questions about, the questions that Sister Beth was talking about. I'll try and cover it all briefly, but I'm going to concentrate on those areas. Okay, so why don't we start? And we'll, oh no. Oh, okay. Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, so these are the topics that are usually covered during the presentation. First of all, we talk about the Pension and Benefits web portal. Government Services Canada has put a lot of effort and time into putting that website together. Anything I say today, you could find that on the website if you knew how to navigate it. We're then going to talk about pension plan contributions. How much do you contribute each year? What is the rate of contribution to earn your benefit for the year? And we'll concentrate a bit on that because it gives you an idea about the plan design. We're then going to talk about supplementary death benefit. Everyone who's on this webinar has life insurance with the federal government, but it's not called life insurance. It's called the supplementary death benefit. When you retire from the federal public service and you're collecting a pension benefit, you can continue that supplementary death benefit into your retirement years, and we'll talk about that. Leave without pay. Quite a few questions on leave without pay. While you're on leave without pay, you are accruing pensionable service. And so we'll talk about that, what the rates that you pay when you're on leave without pay, what are the methods for repaying those amounts, and some of the limitations under the Income Tax Act about how much leave without pay you can actually have towards your service, your pensionable service. Then we're going to talk about retirement benefits. We're going to talk about the benefit formula, the 2% accrual rate. We'll go into detail about that. We'll talk about the requirements that you need to earn an immediate annuity or an unreduced benefit or reduced benefit, or if you so choose, a deferred annuity. We're going to talk about indexation, a very, very important and a very, very expensive provision of the superannuation plan. I'll go into a bit detail about that. And then we're going to talk about the bridge benefit or CPP, QPP coordination. Lots of questions about that, and I'm not surprised because that's the most confounding and confusing aspect of the superannuation plan. So we'll spend quite a bit of time on that so everybody has an understanding about how your plan is designed with respect to that. Also, quite a few questions on service buyback. Under the superannuation plan, you can buy back previous service that you may have had with the federal public service, with the Canadian Armed Forces, with the RCMP, or even service you may have had with an outside employer. So we'll go into a bit of details on how you would do that, what type of service is eligible, how much that would cost, and what is the procedure to do that. So what happens when a pension plan member or a pension plan pensioner passes away? Well, the Federal Public Service Superannuation Plan has very generous survivor benefits for both the surviving spouse and for surviving children. We'll talk about how much that is, who qualifies as a surviving spouse, who qualifies as a surviving child, and we'll talk about what the amounts are. And then last but not least, as employees of the Federal Public Service, you're currently covered under the Public Service Health Care Plan and the Public Service Dental Care Plan. And depending on what level of coverage you have, you probably aren't paying any premiums. Well, when you retire from the Federal Public Service and you start receiving a pension benefit, you'll be able to subscribe to the Public Service Health Care Plan and another type of dental care plan, the Pensioner Dental Services Plan, but you'll have to pay retirement premiums or pensioner premiums, and that's much more than what you'd be paying now as an employee. And then last but not least, there's some service and information that may help you about other aspects of the superannuation plan. And just before I go on, just something I want to emphasize. This is a presentation about the Federal Public Service Pension Plan. It's not a presentation on the Canada pension plan or the Quebec pension plan or the old age security. When I give these presentations, another officer comes on for another 3.5 hours and gives presentation specifically on those subject matter. Now, if you have a question on CPP or old age security, I can answer it. I know a lot about those two programs, but like I say, the real focus is on the public service pension plan. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so again, this is the pension benefit website. Government Services and Public Works Canada has put a lot of effort and a lot of time and resources into putting this website together. When I'm giving the presentation, I usually go and navigate through the website so you see what you can see. But for these purposes, all I'm going to say is that if you have a question about the public service pension plan and you need detailed information, this is the website to go to, www.canada.ca pension-benefits. Okay, so that's all I'm going to say about that. Okay, pension plan contributions for 2020. I'm going to spend a bit of time on that. And so the first thing you see when you take a look at this chart, that in fact, there isn't one pension plan in the federal public service. There's actually two pension plans. There's one for members who were hired prior to January 1st, 2013. We'll call them Group 1. And there's another plan for employees hired after January 1st, 2013. So there's actually two different pension plans. And you can see two different contribution rates. So let's start in the left-hand column with Group 1 employees. Currently, in 2020, you're paying 9.53% of your salary up to the yearly maximal pensionable earnings under the Canada and Quebec pension plan. And for 2020, that was $58,700. So above above $58,700, you're contributing 11.72% of your salary. So for Group 1 employees hired prior to January 1st, 2013, you're paying 9.53% of your salary up to the yearly maximal pensionable earnings under CPP, QPP, and 11.72% of your salary above the CPP, QPP yearly maximal pensionable earnings. Now for Group 2 members who were hired after January 1st, 2013, you're contributing in a different way. You're contributing 8.69% of your salary up to the yearly maximal pensionable earnings under the Canada and Quebec or Canada or Quebec pension plans, and 10.15% of your salary above the yearly maximal pensionable earnings. So that's your contribution rate if you were in Group 2. So there's two things you should notice automatically. First of all, the contribution rates are less for Group 2 members than Group 1 members. And why is that? And the reason for that is in 2012, the federal government passed legislation which created this two-tier pension arrangement, and Group 2 employees who are hired after January 1st, 2013 have lesser benefits under the superannuation plan than members hired prior to January 1st, 2013. So we actually have a two-tiered pension arrangement. People hired after January 1st, 2013 have different pension entitlements than those hired prior to January 1st, 2013. They have more generous pension entitlements. That's the way the plan was designed according to the legislation that was passed in 2012. The other thing you'll notice is that you're contributing a lesser amount for the amount below the yearly maximal pensionable earnings and a higher amount above the yearly maximal pensionable earnings. And you see that's both the same for Group 1 and Group 2. Group 1, 9.53%, less than the yearly maximal pensionable earnings, 11.72% above the yearly maximal pensionable earnings. Group 2, 8.69% below the yearly maximal pensionable earnings, and 10.15% above the yearly maximal pensionable earnings. So your contribution rates are integrated or coordinated with the contribution rates that you make to the Canada or Quebec pension plan. So during the first $58,700 of your salary, you're also contributing to the Canada or Quebec pension plan. So again, your contribution rates are integrated or coordinated with the contribution rates that you make to the Canada and Quebec pension plan. Well, if your contribution rates are integrated or coordinated with the contribution rates you make to the Canada Pension Plan, then so will your benefit entitlements. Your benefit entitlements will also be integrated or coordinated with the benefit entitlements that you earn under the Canada or Quebec Pension Plan. And so the practical implication of that is, once you start receiving your public service pension plan benefit, your pension plan is going to be reduced at age 65. You're going to lose what they call the bridge benefit. Why age 65? Because 65 is the first date you're eligible to receive unreduced Canada or Quebec pension plan benefits. That's the way your plan is designed. The contribution rates and benefit entitlements are integrated or coordinated with the contribution rates and benefit entitlements that you earn under the Canada and Quebec pension plan. So that's how your plan is designed. It's two-tier and it's integrated or coordinated with the provisions of the Canada and Quebec pension plan. So at this particular point, Beth, would there be any questions that address this specific issue? Have member posed any?
Hi, James. I don't see any that is specific to that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on then. Okay, that's great. Okay. So again, this is a supplementary death benefit. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. Again, a supplementary death benefit, you have a life insurance arrangement with the employer, but it's not called life insurance, it's called supplementary death benefit. And what is a supplementary death benefit? First of all, it's a form of term life insurance. There's no cash surrender value. You can't use it as collateral for a loan. How much is a supplementary death benefit? It's your annual pensionable salary times 2. So if you were making $50,000 a year, your supplementary death benefit would be $100,000 a year. How much do you pay for this coverage? You pay 15 cents per month per $1,000 of coverage. So again, if you have $100,000 in coverage, 15 cents a month for every $1,000 coverage would be $15 a month. If you retire and you keep that coverage until age 65, $10,000 of that coverage becomes paid up or is free and is payable to you for the rest of your life. And that's only if you maintain the coverage up until age 65. After age 66, the coverage and the premiums start reducing by 10% per year. So at 65, if you had $100,000 in coverage, at age 66, you lose 10% of that. So it'll be down to $90,000. And it'll keep going on down, declining to that until you reach age 74, at which time all that will be left with you is the $10,000 paid up coverage. So, and as I said, you all have that coverage now as employees. When you retire from the federal public service, you can choose to continue this coverage after you retire and you're in receipt of a public service pension benefit. That's the benefit. The next slide just talks about who you can name as a beneficiary. And the only practical implication is you can either name your estate, you can name one person, any person over the age 18, or if you choose, you can note or name a charitable or benevolent or religious or educational institution. So that's who would be the beneficiary of the supplementary death benefit. So this is all this slide is meant to show, and that's all I was really meant to say regarding the supplementary death benefit, which again, you can continue into your retirement years after you leave the federal public service and start collecting a pension benefit. Okay, leave without pay. There were a lot of questions about leave without pay. Well, any authorized leave without pay, any authorized leave that you take without pay is pensionable service. And people have taken a lot of sort of leave, sick leave, personal leave, parental leave, maternity, paternity, whatever it is. It's all pensionable service. However, when you're on leave without pay, you're required to pay the pension deficiencies to have that service to your credit. Now, there's also a provision that if you don't want to include that leave without pay, you have the option of not including any leave after the first 3 months. So the first 3 months is mandatory. After 3 months, you have the option not to include leave without pay as pensionable service. I don't know why anybody would do that, but anyways, that's a possibility. How you pay the leave without pay is usually when you return to work, it's deducted from your salary over twice the length of time you've been off. So if you've been off a year on maternity leave and you return to work, the leave without pay deficiencies, pension deficiencies, are usually recovered over a 2-year period, and they're direct deduction from your paycheck. If you retire and you still owe pension deficiencies, then that would be, those amounts over the same time period would be deducted from your pension check. This slide also indicates that if you're suspended from duty, if you're on seasonal layoff, or you're on strike, all those periods are non-pensionable and non-electable. Finally, there's a limitation under the Income Tax Act about how much leave you can actually include as pensionable service over your career. There's a general provision for a maximum of 5 years, which does not include sick leave without pay. And there's an additional 3 years, 1 year each for each child from the date of the child is born for 1 year after that for each child up to 3. So in addition to the 5-year general, you can also have an additional 3 years of pensionable service as leave without pay based on a child within 1 year of that child's birth or adoption. Okay, so that's how the leave without pay provisions, and again, it's pensionable service. You'd have to pay for it. It's done through payment of paid pension deficiencies. So again, there were a lot of questions on leave without pay, and so I tried to address them, and this is how your pension plan works with respect to leave without pay. Okay. Now, all this slide does is show you that under the Federal Public Service Pension Plan, there's 2 types of benefits. There's a lump sum benefit and a monthly benefit. We're really going to concentrate on the 3 types of monthly benefits: an immediate annuity, an annual allowance, or a deferred annuity. And we'll go into details about those. But there are also lump sum benefits, a return to contributions, or a transfer value. So if you have less than 2 years of pensionable service and you terminate your employment, your only option is a return to contributions. If you're less than 50 and you have at least 2 years of service, or less than, and the brackets stand for someone who's in group 2. So 50 years of age applies to group 1, 55 to group 2, and you're going to see that throughout the presentation. So if you retire from the Federal Public Service or terminate your employment prior to age 50 for group 1 or prior to age 55 for group 2, you have access to what the transfer value is. I have access to a benefit called the transfer value. What is the transfer value? The transfer value is the actuarial value, present day actual value of your future entitlements, pension entitlements into the future. They do an actuarial calculation. They project how much you would earn on a pension plan into the future. Then they discount that back according to a given discount rate. So that's the transfer value. It's again, a lump sum benefit. A portion has to be transferred into a locked-in RSP, another registered pension plan, or if you so choose, you can purchase a life annuity from either a life insurance company or a financial institution. There's also an amount in excess of the tax limit, and that has to be paid to you at source, or if you have RSP room available, you can put that excess amount into your RSP on a tax deferred basis. So that's the transfer value. Again, it's a lump sum benefit. It's only available if you terminate prior to age 50, group 1, prior to age 55, group 2. Depending on the amount of service that you have, these transfer values, if you're under that age group, can be significant. I was giving the presentation once about a year ago, and there was an EX member in the class that was taking the presentation, had very significant years of service, was just under age 50, and her transfer value was $1.4 million. So that, that looks like a lot of money, but it has to pay her pension benefits for the future. And this person was debating whether she was going to terminate her employment and take the transfer value, and she had to decide about that. Okay, so that's the transfer value. That's the lump sum benefit. So now we're going to move to monthly benefits and how your monthly benefit is calculated. And basically, the formula at the top of this chart it's called the 2% accrual rate. 2% times your years and days of pensionable service. Every day you work in the federal public service is an incremental increase in your pension entitlement, times your average salary for your highest paid 5 consecutive years of service. Your average salary over your 5 highest paid consecutive years of service. Now, in 99.9% of the time, your average salary over your highest paid 5 consecutive years of service will be your last 5 years. But that's not always the case. For example, you may know one of your colleagues who took a demotion, who took a voluntary demotion in their last 5 years. So in that, just to transition into retirement. So in that case, that person's last highest 5 years may not be their last 5 years. It may be some other period of time, and the Public Service Pension Center will calculate that period of time to calculate the pension benefit. Another example where it may not be your last 5 years is you may have served in an acting position at some time, and that acting position actually pays you more than the salary you're making on your retirement date. Depending on how long you were in that acting position, it may not be your last 5 years of service. It may be some other period that includes that acting pay, and the Public Service Pension Center can calculate, and that's the average salary that they use to calculate your pension benefit. So it's called the 2% accrual rate. And you can see an asterisk at the bottom there. The maximum number of years of service that you can accumulate under the Federal Public Service Superannuation Plan is 35 years of pensionable service. So let's take a couple examples. Let's take someone who has 32 years of service and they're earning $60,000 as their average salary over the highest 5 paid years. In that particular case, their pension benefit will be 2% times 32, which is 64%, times 60,000. So they'll be entitled to a pension benefit of $38,400 a year, or $3,200 a month when they start collecting this benefit. Now, the more pensionable service you have, as I said, the higher your pension benefit will be. Well, let's take someone else who only has 17 years of service. Well, their pension benefit in this particular case will be 2% times 17, which is 34% times 60,000. So they'll have a smaller pension. Their pension will be $20,400 a year, or $1,700 a month. Okay, so it's the 2% accrual rate. And as you can see, the double asterisk down there is, you recall that this pension benefit includes both a lifetime portion and a bridge benefit. So a portion of that $38,400 or a portion of that $20,400 is going to be lost once you reach age 65. And again, why age 65? 65 is the earliest date you can collect unreduced Canada or Quebec pension plan benefits, and your contribution rates and benefit entitlements are integrated or coordinated with the contribution rates and benefit entitlements that you make under the Canada and Quebec pension plan. Okay, so that's the benefit formula. That's the basic premise of how your pension benefit is calculated. So Beth, I'll go back to you. Does anybody have any questions about that? The benefit formula at all, or something related to that?
Hi, James, it's Nicole. There's several questions that have actually come in about this specific section. So the first one that I wanted to ask you is, so maternity parental leave without pay up to a year is allowable for each child outside of the CRA limits for leave without pay. Is that the correct understanding?
That is the correct, yeah, 1 year for each child. Yes, in addition to the 5 years of general leave. Yes.
Okay. Also, another question that came in is, I'll just say to folks that are on the line, if some of your questions are very specific to your context, I'm just kind of reading questions that are more generalized, and what we'll do is respond specifically to you as opposed to taking up time. So the next question is, if the maximum is 35 years of contributions, why do we still have to contribute at a reduced rate beyond 35 years of service?
That's a very good question. Okay, good. There's two, there's actually one reason. Well, actually, there's two reasons. First of all, and they got this from this slide. First of all, part of that extra 1% that you're contributing after 35 years is to pay for the indexation. As I said, indexation is a very generous, a very expensive benefit. So a portion of that 1% goes to payment for the indexation. Secondly, as I said, it's the years of service that are frozen at 35. It's not the average salary. So once you accumulate 35 years of service, this 5-year formula continues to grow after 35 years. That's the other reason you're paying the 1% additional amount. That was a good question. Any others?
Yes, there's another question.
One more.
Oh, okay, one more?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it true that our transfer value calculation will change in December due to new actuarial rules? How could this affect the transfer value?
That's correct. That's correct. These are done according to discount rates, according to actuarial values, commuted values, and those change. And they're planning to make, the actuarial world is planning to make some changes this upcoming September. So that will impact the amount of the transfer value. That is correct. Okay.
Thanks, James.
Okay, good. I'll move on. I'm trying to be conscious of time. Okay, there were questions about part-time. I'll just go through this quickly. If you have part-time service, the part that your pension benefit accrual is prorated according to the hours that you work, your assigned work week, divided by the standard work week. So what this chart shows is someone who works 35 years, earning 60,000, they're full-time. 2% times 35 years is 70%, 60,000. They'll be getting a pension benefit of $3,500 a month. Now let's take an example of someone who works 30 years of full-time and 5 years of part-time. This is how your pension benefit will be calculated. For the full-time service, 2% times 30 years times 60,000, that'll give you a $3,000 monthly benefit. Then for your part-time service, it's 2% times 5 years times your full-time equivalent earnings. You don't want to penalize part-time employees twice, times the ratio of your assigned work week divided by for your standard work week, which in this case was 20 hours. They'll earn an additional $266 a month. So they'll receive a monthly benefit of $3,266 a month. So you can see the impact of working at 5 years of part-time compared to someone who worked 35 years at full-time. So there were questions on part-time, so I thought I'd show that, and that's how the benefit is calculated. Okay, when can you collect an immediate annuity? An immediate annuity is an unreduced pension benefit based on the 2% formula that we just talked about. So if you reach certain age and service thresholds, you'll be entitled to an unreduced pension, which is called an immediate annuity under the Superannuation Act. So first of all, if you're group 1 and you're age 60, or group 2 and age 65, and you have at least 2 years of pensionable service, if you retire after those thresholds, you'll be entitled to an unreduced pension benefit based on your years of pensionable service according to the 2% accrual rate. There's also, if you're 55 and you're in group 1 and you have at least 30 years, or 60 and you're group 2 and you have at least 30 years of service and you retire, you're also eligible for an unreduced pension benefit, which is an immediate annuity. Again, if you meet those thresholds, 55 and 30 and 60 and 30, and you retire, you're eligible for an unreduced pension benefit, unreduced according to the 2% formula that we already talked about. Now remember, it's 55 and 30. It's not the rule of 85. There's no such thing as the rule of 85. If you're 56 with 29 years, you don't get an unreduced pension. You have to have both criteria. So it's 55 and 30, not the rule of 85. Last but not least, the final row, there's a provision in the Superannuation Act. It's called medical retirement. If at any age, if you have at least 2 years of pensionable service and you're deemed by Health Canada to be totally and permanently disabled, you're eligible for an unreduced pension benefit no matter what age you are and no matter how many years of pensionable service. It's a special provision. It's called medical retirement. So these are the age and service requirements that you have to meet for an unreduced pension. under the superannuation plan. It's called an immediate annuity. Now, you don't have to reach these age thresholds and reach the immediate annuity age or service criteria to collect a pension benefit. But if you retire earlier than that, you're going to incur a penalty because you're going to be collecting that pension benefit for a longer period of time based on your contributions. So that's called the annual allowance. So like I say, here it is, the annual allowance. When you can collect an annual allowance, I'm not going to go into the details, but if you decide to retire early, your pension plan benefits based on the 2% accrual rate are going to be reduced. And the formula for reducing, this is group 1, is this complicated chart. So let's take an example. Let's just take an example of the top row, and it's called an annual allowance. Don't ask me why it's called an annual allowance. It's not paid annually. It's not an allowance. So in this case, let's take an example of someone who has 24 years of service and is age 50. Let's take exactly age 50. They want to retire, okay? Can they retire? Yes, they can retire. They can collect an annual allowance. What will the reduction be? Well, if they retire at age 50, you see the formula. 5% times 60 minus 50, which is 10, times 5%, a 50% reduction. Okay, that person, if they wanted to start collecting their pension benefit at age 50, which they could do, they would have to take a 50% reduction in their pension benefit to start collecting that at age 50. It's an annual allowance, a reduced pension payable at age 50. Second of all, we have under legislation called the 50-25 rule. So let's take an example of someone who has age 50 and has only one more year of service, 25 years of service. And so that's a different rule with a different reduction factor. So if you take this, look at the second row where this person would fall, they're age 50 with 25 more years of service, with 25 years of service. So their reduction would be 5%, the greater of 5% times 55 minus their age, which is 50. So that's 5, so it's 25%, or 5% times 30 minus their years of service, which is 25. So that's also 5, that's also 25%. So in this case, for this person having only one more year of pensionable service, they're entitled to a 25% reduction if they start collecting their at age 50, whereas the previous person who only had 24 years of service in the top row would incur a 50% reduction. So that's the importance if you're thinking of retiring early about achieving the 25-50 rule. Okay, now this is just for group 1. This is the factor for group 1. This is the factor for group 2. And you see what they've done, they've ratcheted up everything by 5 years, just like they did with the immediate annuity. Remember, we talked about the immediate annuity. That's what the legislation did in 2012. They ratcheted up the requirements to receive an unreduced pension by 5 years, 60 to 65, 55 to 60. That's why group 2 pays less contributions. Okay, so that's group 1, that's group 2. Then the last monthly benefit is what we refer to as deferred annuity. And when I retired from the federal public service, when I was age 39, this is the option I chose. I chose a deferred annuity. So instead of collecting my pension benefit at 39, which I couldn't do at age 39 anyways, I decided to defer my pension until age 60, at which point I would receive an unreduced pension benefit. I'd have to wait from 39 to age 60 to collect that benefit, but it would be unreduced based on the 2% formula. So that's called a deferred annuity. You decide not to collect your pension benefit right away. You decide not to collect a reduced pension or a transfer value. You decide to defer it till age either 60 if you're group 1, age 65 if you're group 2, and you start collecting an unreduced pension benefit. Okay, so those are the 3 types of monthly benefits under the superannuation plan. I'll just pause there for a second, Beth, and see if there's any questions that relates to these monthly benefits that I can maybe respond to. We'll take a couple maybe, and we'll move on.
Hi, James, it's Nicole.
Yes.
There was a question, why do group 2 people have to work 5 more years?
Why? Because, as I said, right at the beginning, because they're paying less into the plan. That's the way the legislation was crafted in 2012. Anybody hired after January 1st, 2013 is going to receive lesser pension benefits. They're going to pay lesser into the plan, but they're going to get lesser benefits. The government wanted to do that. They wanted to reduce their costs for the pensions. So what they said was, well, anybody who's going to come in the future, the legislation was passed in December of 2012, anybody hired after that date, they're going to get a lesser pension benefit. Okay, and so that's why they have to wait an additional 5 years. It's a lesser pension benefit. That's the way the legislation was designed for that particular instance.
Okay.
Another question?
Yeah, sorry. That same person actually just amended her question a bit to say, the better question is, why was group 2 created? Because she would rather pay more and be able to retire earlier.
Well,
I don't know,
because again, as I said, the government wanted to have people that, I mean, this costs money. This costs money. The government pays half the pension contributions. They didn't want to keep paying the same cost for group 1 employees. So they introduced legislation. The PSAC had a massive campaign, but the legislation passed anyways under the Harper regime. And as a result of that, it costs less. It costs, the group 2 costs the government a lot less than group 1. And just one more piece of information, as of 2019, not even of 2020, there were 100,000 group 2 members in the federal public service. Imagine that, 100,000 contributors at group 2, just since 2013, 100,000. So that's why they did it. Okay.
For group 2, with the age 50 to 55 and years of service 25 plus, what is the reduction? It didn't seem to be reflected in the chart.
25 plus? Well, okay, for group 1?
No, the person said for group 2 with age 50 to 55.
Okay. So the question is?
What is the reduction?
And what is the scenario again?
Sure. With age 50 to 55 and 25 plus years of service, what is the reduction?
Okay. Okay, that's a good question. I think there's an error in this chart. Okay, I think that's supposed to be 55, less than 55. Sorry about that. Okay. There's an error in the chart. Okay, so that's why that person didn't see it. It's between 50 and 55. There's an error. That top row should reach age 55. Sorry about that.
No worry. So there's one other one before you move on, James. Is it reduced for life or until age 60 or 65?
Yes. Yeah, no. I hear that all the time. No, it's a lifetime reduction. Okay. That's a good question. Oh, I'm gonna have to make a note of that. Yeah, okay, I have to make a note of that. Okay, good. Well, it's good to spot that. Okay, all this slide does is, and about 3 or 4 months ago, I gave a presentation in a safe environment to about 17 of our members who were declared surplus to operational requirements. Well, if you're declared surplus to operational requirements, the superannuation plan has special provisions. Again, if you're involuntary terminated, you're an indeterminate employee, you have at least, you're at least age 55. If you're group 1, age 60. If you're group 2, you have 2 or more years of pensionable service, and you've been employed in the public service for at least 10 years. And then there's another provision that you do not opt for the annual the education allowance under the workforce adjustment provisions of the collective agreement. If you meet all that criteria, the annual allowance reduction that we talked about, the 5% reduction, is waived. Okay, so this is a special provision to address older employees who are perhaps declared surplus to operational requirements. It's just a special provision in the superannuation plan to address that particular scenario. Okay, Okay, well, this is just deductions. If you start collecting your pension check, you'll see a number of deductions. I'm not going to go into any detail about that. Okay, is your pension adjusted for cost of living increases? And it certainly is. Again, indexation, your plan is increased by 100% of the rate of inflation. Once you retire, is increased by 100% of the rate of inflation every year, effective January 1st of each year. A very, very expensive and a very, very costly and a very, very generous and a very, very important provision of the superannuation plan. So I want to illustrate this, and this is a chart of all the indexation increases since indexation began from 1970 to 2021. Okay, so you can see it over that entire period. Now I just want to concentrate on a few years. That year right there, 1975, 1976. If anybody remembers, the prime minister at the time was Pierre Trudeau. If anybody remembers, at that particular point in time, inflation was rampant, and Trudeau introduced what they call wage and price controls. Well, look at the indexation increases for those 2 years alone: 10%, 10.1%, and 11.3% in those 2 years alone. Take a look at another year, 1982. If anybody remembers what the mortgage rates, a 5-year mortgage rate was in 1982, it was 20%. Imagine that, a 5-year mortgage rate at 20%. Right now, you can get a 5-year locked-in mortgage rate for about 1.74%, a bit lower. Okay, so again, cost of living very high in 1982, the highest rate of indexation in the history of the superannuation plan. But you look at the last 25 years, and we've been in a low inflation rate environment. In fact, inflation has only been above 3% once, and that was in 2004. But don't forget, even if in a low inflation rate environment, these indexation increases accumulate and compound over time. So over a period of time, they can amount to quite a bit. For example, take someone who decided to retire in 2003. So that was about 18 years ago. That person retired 2003, 18 years ago. Well, right now, the pension that person is collecting, 1/3 of that is not coming from the 2% formula. 1/3 of that is coming from indexation. And that's in a low inflation rate environment. So again, it's a very, very important provision. And again, as I say, a very, very expensive provision of the superannuation plan. So that's indexation. Again, very, very important for people to know. Okay, and I'm not going to talk about that. And it's in French as well. I don't know. Okay, CPP, QPP coordination. I'll spend some time on this. Yeah, okay, we're doing pretty good for time. Okay, remember what I talked about before. Your contribution rates are integrated or coordinated with the contribution rates you make to the Canada Quebec pension plan. 9.53%, below the yearly maximum pension earnings, 11.72, above 8.69, below the yearly maximum pension earnings, 10.15%, above. So your contribution rates are integrated or coordinated. It only makes sense that your benefit entitlements will also be integrated or coordinated. So then the question is, well, how much? You're going to lose the bridge benefit at age 65. Well, how much am I going to lose? And this is the formula. It's the bridge benefit factor, which is 0.625%. So anybody who retires in 2020, their benefits will be reduced at age 65 by 0.625% times 32 times the lesser of the average salary of the CPP, QPP average maximum pension earnings in the year of retirement and the 4 years previous. So that's 56,440. So when they reach age 65, this person with 32 years of service with this factor will see their pension reduced by $11,288 a year, or $940 a month. Now, if you have less pensionable service, your bridge benefit is going to be less, and your reduction is going to be less. 17 years of service, 0.625%. Times 17 times 56,400, they'll see a reduction at age 65 of $5,996 a year, or $499 a month. Now, you recall when we talked about previously the person with the 32 years, what they were receiving under the 2% formula, and what the 17-year employee would be receiving under the 2% formula with 17 years, and those were the amounts. Well, if you take those amounts and compare them to the bridge benefit, that's what you're looking at. Someone who got the 2% accrual rate with 32 years at 60,000, they were earning $38,400. But at age 65, they'll lose 11,288. That's their bridge benefit. And again, the person with 17 years at 60,000, they were earning $20,400 a year. They'll be losing $5,996 under the bridge benefit. That's the way your plan is designed. It's integrated or coordinated with the provisions that you earn under the Canada and Quebec pension plan benefit. Okay, and this just says when the bridge benefit ends, again, the month following your 65th birthday. So I have a couple slides here that illustrate how this works. So let's go at the far right-hand column. Someone who retires, say at 55, and they're on an immediate annuity, that immediate annuity includes both the bridge and the lifetime portion. And we're going to assume that this person decides to start collecting their CPP at age 65. As you know, people can collect the CPP prior to age 65. But in this case, we're going to assume they collect the benefit at age 65. So under this scenario, they retire at 55. They got an 55 or 60. They got an unreduced pension. It's comprised of both the bridge benefit and lifetime pension. When they reach age 65, what happens? Well, they lose the bridge benefit and they start collecting their CPP. And you can see it all evens out. You're collecting the same amount after retirement as before retirement, except it's from two different sources. So we'll go back. We'll try that again. So again, you say you're retired at age 55 or age 60 on an unreduced pension comprised of both the bridge benefit and the lifetime portion. You reach age 65. What happens at age 65? You lose the bridge benefit and you start collecting CPP, QPP. So it's a wash. You're collecting the same amount after retirement at age 65 as you were prior to age 65. Now, as I said, you can start collecting your CPP early, as early as age 60. You have to take a significant reduction, but you can. So how does that scenario work? So let's see that. So again, far right-hand side, 55, retiring on an unreduced pension, comprised of the bridge benefit and the lifetime pension. Under this scenario, at age 60, they start collecting the early CPP. So do they lose the bridge benefit? No, they don't lose the bridge benefit. Why? Because the legislation says the bridge benefit ends at 65. So these people are stacking their early CPP, QPP on top of their unreduced pension at 2%. And so, again, you're collecting your full pension, 2% formula, plus an early CPP benefit. Many people retire at age 60 on account of that. But what happens at 65? At age 65, you lose the bridge benefit. And in this scenario, the bridge benefit is going to be probably more than what you're collecting in CPP, QPP, because you decided to start collecting your CPP, QPP early, and that's reduced. So that's how your plan is designed. Again, it's integrated or coordinated with the contribution rates and benefit entitlements that you earn under the Canada and Quebec pension plan. Okay, so I'm trying to be conscious of time. So, okay, if there's questions on service buyback, I can address that. All we know, and again, there's lots of details on the pensions and benefit website. You can, again, buyback service from the public service, Canadian Armed Forces, RCMP, or even outside employment. You have to, depending on when you make the election, you have to pay the amount for the time, for the cost of that election. You can get an estimate of that by going to a pension calculator on the pension benefit website or calling the pension center at 1-800-561-7930, and that number's at the back as well. In most service buybacks, you also have to pass a medical examination, and then you can pay it back in installments or by a lump sum. So again, there were a lot of questions about that, and I'll be willing to answer more of those questions, but that's basically how a service buyback works. Again, survivor benefits, very, very generous survivor benefits for both a spouse and common law or a common law partner, and children. For the spouse, it's 50% of the member's unreduced pension benefit. For each child, up to a maximum of 4, it's 10%. So if a pensioner or employee passes away, they have a spouse, she's entitled to 50% unreduced pension, and then an additional 10% pension for each surviving child. And you have to meet the definition. You can only collect it, the child can only collect it until they're 18 or up to 25 if they're a full-time student at a recognized educational facility. Okay, I won't deal with that. Okay, and then this, of course, is you all are covered under the public service healthcare plan as employees. And again, depending on what level of coverage you have, you're probably not paying any premiums. Well, when you retire from the federal public service and you start collecting your pension benefit and you have at least 6 years of pensionable service, which is a new rule, you can keep the public service healthcare plan. It's the exact same plan, except you're going to have to pay retiree premiums. And the retiree premiums are for level 1, $59.68 a month for individual, $68.08 for level 2, $82.90 for level 3, and for family, it's $122.05 level 1, $134.19 level 2, and $151.42 for level 3. And remember, if you don't know this now, you'll know it after this session. The only difference is between these levels of coverage is the amount that you'll be reimbursed for a private or semi-private room. $60 for level 1 coverage, $140 for level 2 coverage, and $220 for level 3. All the other provisions of the public service healthcare plan are identical under those 3 levels of coverage. That's the only difference. You also have dental care coverage as employees. And again, the dental care plan coverage is totally employer paid. So you aren't paying any premiums. But when you retire and you start collecting your pension benefit, you'll be eligible for subscription to the pensioner's dental services plan. It's not exactly the same as the plan you got now. It's similar, but not exactly. And the premium rates, again, are pensioner only, $17.46 a month. Pensioner and 1 eligible family member, $36.85 a month. And a pensioner and more than 1 eligible family, you can see it's configured a bit differently. It's $44.38 a month. As well as if you decide to opt for this coverage, you're locked in for 3 full calendar years. You can't opt out. You're locked in to pay those contributions for that period of time. Also, if you decide to leave the pensioner's dental services plan, you can't get back in. You can't reapply. So those are 2 different rules that apply to the pension dental services plan as opposed to the public service healthcare plan. Okay, and these are just different issues that are sometimes raised during the course of the pension presentation. I'm not going to address those now. And these are numbers, important numbers that you can cite if you have questions about if you're going to retire and you have questions about these particular issues. There's the numbers and websites that you can visit to get that information. And then last but not least, here's the number, 1-800-561-7930, 500 pension officers in Shediac, New Brunswick, who do nothing day in and day out by answering questions but from members such as yourselves or pensioners regarding their pension benefits. Okay, so that's the presentation. That's the short version in an hour's time. So if we have questions, I'd be more than willing to address them at this particular point in time. Okay, was that okay?
Thank you so much. That was awesome. There is a lot of questions that we haven't gotten to yet. Yeah, go ahead.
Just one moment. I just want to let other participants know that we will be sending an email out to you with the PowerPoint. So don't panic if you missed numbers or links. You'll get that in your email. So I just wanted to let people know that, and you can go ahead with the question. Sorry about the interruption.
No worries. I was actually just going to say that, and I was also going to say for those of you that have asked questions that we haven't gotten to yet, even if your question wasn't specific to your situation, we will over the next little while make sure that we get in contact with you with some resources or answers or so forth. James, I have a couple questions that are very similar in context, so I'll read them both, and then if you want to provide an answer.
Sure.
Okay, so how can CPP even out if you aren't entitled to the full CPP because you didn't contribute the full amount every year due to going to school, university, or being unemployed or making less? And then the second question is, When you work part-time, not only do you lose money on CPP, you lose on pension when you lose your bridging at 65. As a part-time employee, can you do anything to increase your superannuation?
Okay, good questions. First of all, the reason it evens out, and again, this applies, when I say it evens out for your pensionable service within the federal public service. The member is right. You know, you could be working anywhere before you join the federal public service, or you could be out of it for a period of time. So that isn't taken into consideration. What these charts are meant to show is what the service is within the public service, what you earned within the public service. Outside, you're right, you may have earned more, and then the CPP is going to be more. But this is only for the public service. That's what these charts are meant. That's why I say it evens out. It doesn't even out to your actual CPP benefit. It evens out to the CPP benefit that you accrued while you were employed in the federal public service. These charts would be good for anybody who doesn't work in the federal public service. For anybody who only worked in the federal public service, it should work then. And what was the second question? I'm sorry.
It was just if you work part-time, is there anything you can do to increase your superannuation?
Yeah, okay, that was a good question. First of all, the only way you would increase your superannuation benefit is by working additional years of full-time service. But the answer is, and I think I know where this member's going, you're stuck with that part-time service. Okay, there's nothing you can do to increase your salary or increase your pensionable coverage for those part-time years. I work part-time, I know that, and that's been an issue. But the point is if you want to increase your pension benefit, you'll have to work longer. You'll still come up to that 35-year threshold, and you'll be stuck with this part-time service. There's no way to increase your pensionable service benefit for that period of part-time service under the Superannuation Act.
Okay, so this next question is actually somewhat related. So if you retire with 35 years and collecting pension, how is your pension affected if you go back to work as a casual? It's kind of the flip of what people are asking.
See, this is one of the issues towards the end there, reemployment after retirement. Okay, the rule under the superannuation plan is that you cannot be a contributor and receiving a pension benefit at the same time. So if you're collecting a pension benefit and you go into a position where you have to contribute to the superannuation plan, your pension benefit ceases automatically. Now, this person is talking about casual employment. Well, casual employees don't contribute to the superannuation plan. So that can happen. A person can will have no impact on their pension benefit. They'll continue to collect their pension benefit and they'll earn salary as a casual employee. It's only if you become a contributor under superannuation plan that your pension benefit will be impacted.
Okay, I actually have another question around survivor benefits. So does that mean if we retire early with a reduction, the survivor benefit ignores that reduction and uses the original unreduced value for the survivor benefit? And does that include the bridging value?
Very, very good. What does that slide say? And the member caught that, you probably know it. Entitled to 50% of the member's unreduced pension. You're right. It ignores any reduction for the annual allowance. It also ignores the bridge benefit reduction. So it's 50% of the member's unreduced pension. And I've had cases, not many, but I've had cases where the survivor benefit is actually larger than the member's pension was. And when I get these calls from these lawyers and they can't figure it out, that's why that happens. You can do the math, and that's a possibility under that calculation. So that member's actually absolutely correct.
I have a couple general questions. So one of them is there a month that's best or most advantageous to retire for indexation reasons?
Indexation, okay, yes, there is. Well, I skipped over it, but I'll go through it now. Good, no, that's a good question. Well, Okay, but and again, this is in French. I don't know how this got in here. Anyways, so it doesn't matter. So what the member's asking, is there a more favorable? And what this chart shows is the first year you retire, the first indexation increase you're going to get the next January 1st is prorated based on the months that you've been in retirement. So if you retire in January, the next January, when you get your first indexation increase, you're going to have 11 full months of retirement, and therefore that amount will be, the ratio of that indexation will be 11/12. Whereas if you retired in December, you haven't spent any time in retirement for that prior year. So the indexation that you receive that following January 1st will be 0. You won't get any. So just based on that, obviously January would be the more favorable period of time for indexation purposes, but I wouldn't base my retirement just on what fraction you're going to get on the first indexation increase. I mean, if you work till December, you'd have a full year of salary. You'd have a full year of a pensionable service. That would certainly outweigh this fractional increase in the indexation amount. So I guess the answer is yes, there's more favorable years, but that shouldn't really factor into when you're going to retire.
Thank you. Is there a list of employers eligible for pension transfer agreements?
Yes. Again, where do you go? Pension and Benefit website, there's 90 pension transfer agreements. They're mostly provincial governments, universities, schools, healthcare organizations, municipal governments, but they're on that website. You'll find a list, and there's 90 of them.
Awesome, thank you. You talked about part-time service not being able to increase their contributions or replace the years being stuck with those years. What happens if you get 35 years full-time, then go part-time? Does your pension get reduced?
Does your pension get reduced? Okay, geez, what is that? Well, first of all, again, you're stuck at 35, so the contribution rates would be dropped to 1%. You'd be at that first 35 years of service. That would count towards your pension benefit. And again, as I said, if you work past 35 years, your salary, your full-time equivalent salary, will be used to calculate your pension benefit. So that's what will happen in that particular scenario.
Can pension transfer agreements be drafted at any time? This member was under the impression when they were first hired that it had to be done then or never.
Okay, that's not correct. Parties can sign pension transfer agreements, and they can apply to people retroactively. That's my understanding.
Okay. There was also a question around whether or not any of this can be negotiated in collective bargaining.
At the present time, according to the, whether it's Public Service Labor Relations Act or whatever you call it this time, you cannot negotiate pension provisions.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you can't lobby for them, but right at this particular point in time, you can't negotiate pension entitlements. There was a court case in Quebec, some people may have followed it, where a bargaining agent in Quebec was successful in challenging that, but it was subsequently quashed at the Quebec Court of Appeal.
Thank you. Does service buyback affect the base rate for annual leave entitlement increments?
No. Again, I'm not a collective agreement expert, but these are based on pensionable service. Pensionable service is different than service that you accrue under the collective agreement. So no, that wouldn't increase your annual entitlements. Annual leave, it shouldn't, because they're two different types of service.
If you don't have a spouse, can the survivor benefits 50% go to your child?
Good question. Okay, if there's no spouse, the child survivor benefit is doubled. You see that, doubled if no eligible spouse or partner. It's called an orphan's benefit. So if there's 2 children, that 10% is doubled. So that would be 40%.
Okay. So this is actually a question of going back to earlier in the presentation around the 2 groups. Why, as a group 2 member, can we not voluntarily pay more premiums on our own without anything extra being paid by the government?
The answer to that, but like I say, the other thing about this, regarding the question around collective bargaining, your pension plan is a statute. Okay, it's a federal statute. The only way it could be changed is through an act of parliament. So what this person is asking for would have to be approved through an act of parliament. I mean, I guess you could do anything with an act of parliament, but right now, under the terms of the legislation, the answer is no.
Okay. What salary amount is used? Your base salary only or salary including overtime?
Overtime is not included. It includes things like the bilingual bonus, like acting pay, things like shift premium or night premium are not included. Terminal allowances are included. So again, you go to this website, they'll give you a list of the salary and allowances that are included as pensionable salary and the salary and allowances that are not included as pensionable salary.
Okay, I'll just read this out. So prior to the union leave with pay cost recovery clauses being gained in the PA collective agreement expiry, actually, you know what, sorry, that question will respond specifically to that person. I apologize for that. I'm just scanning through because some of these are very specific to people's situations. Oh, no.
Nicole, while you scan, I just want to flag the time. So we're at 7:50, so maybe 2 or 3 more questions and then we should close off.
Okay. Beth, do you want to just actually respond to a couple questions that have been posed about whether or not we can share what questions were asked and some of the answers? I think that's a bit complicated, but.
It might be. I mean, we could look at doing maybe an FAQ with some of the more frequently asked questions, but we literally got, I think, over 100 questions, including what came in today. So
Right.
that type of document, I think, would be too extensive, but we could potentially look at a basic FAQ.
Okay. Difference between the date of hire versus effective date of plan membership with regards to trying to sort out if you're in group 1 or 2. How do you do that, I guess?
Okay, okay, sorry. This is hire, date of hire.
Okay.
But for some reason, you were hired prior to January 1st, 2013. You didn't become a member until after January 1st, 2013. You're group 2.
Okay. Does part-time count towards years of pensionable service in the same way that full-time does?
Yeah, okay, once right here. Yes, it does. That's what that slide says. Each year of part-time service is a year of pensionable service. That's why the previous people were asking, you know, is there some way we can get out of that? You're locked in. You're locked in at that fractional rate. So, but it counts as 1 year.
Now that the government of Canada has done away with pension statements, where can people go to get their pension statements and the associated information that's usually in them?
Okay. Well, okay. They haven't done away with them because of the Phoenix fiasco. There was no way the pension center was going to start issuing pension statements with inaccurate salary data. So they decided to suspend it. Eventually, hopefully they'll recover. But to answer the member's question, you could contact the Government of Canada Pension Center at 1-800-561-0000. 7930. And then if you have access to the Government of Canada information technology infrastructure, you can go to your compensation web application using the MyKey protocol, and you should be able to get information on your pension entitlements from that source.
Okay. I think this will probably maybe one or two more. Is there a way to opt out of contributing to the pension plan and not contribute?
No, it's a condition of employment in accordance with the Public Service Superannuation Act.
Okay. Date to retire within a month. Does the actual date matter?
Well, like I say, you took a look at the formula. It's your years and days of service. Every day you work in the federal public service is an additional pension an additional increase in your pension benefit. It's pensionable years and days of service. Years and days of pensionable service. So and if you ever look at your pension statements, you'll see 31 years, 269 days, 31 years, 105 days. Every day is a day of pensionable service.
Thank you. Are there times when it might not be worth buying back your pension?
Well, the election is costed on the date that you exercise the election. Okay, so if you had say term employment and you work 30 years, and then at the end of the 30 years you start assessing whether you should buy back that term employment, the cost will be astronomical. So, and the point is, you can calculate that. You can go to the pension website or call 1-800-561-7930, get an estimate of what the cost will be, and then get an indication of what additional pension you'll get from that, and then you can make an assessment. But scenarios like that, you wait 30 years to exercise an election, more than likely it's not going to be worth it. The cost will surpass the eventual benefit that you'll receive.
Okay, thanks. Beth, do we have time for more or no?
I would say let's do one more and then let's wrap up.
Okay. Did I hear that acting pay does not count towards the 5 best years? If we work acting positions for years, are we negatively impacting our pensions?
I didn't say that. I must have misspoke. Acting pay is considered pensionable salary. Acting pay and bilingual bonus and terminal allowances, they're included as a pensionable salary. Overtime, shift premiums, weekend premiums, those are not included in pensionable salary.
Awesome. Thanks so much, James. Beth?
Okay, great. Thank you. That was fantastic. That was a tremendous amount of information given in an hour and a half. Thank you very much for everyone who joined us today, and a very big thank you, of course, to James, Nicole, and Michelle for helping get this off the ground. Obviously, James, you carried most of us, so thank you for that.
Okay, no problem. Enjoy doing it.
I will just say a few last reminders before we let everyone go. The recording again will be made available online, so stay tuned. Please try and complete the survey. If you can have it back to us by early next week, that would be great. It does help us with planning additional webinars. If you did ask a question on the webinar or on the registration form that hasn't been answered, please be patient. We will take a look at all the questions that come in to make sure that you've received an answer, and we'll send you out an email with a response, and you will receive a copy of the PowerPoint presentation as well. So once again, thanks for everyone for joining, and have a good evening.